let's get started. I had a very interesting observation I wanted to share with everyone tonight. And it's a contrast between two groups of people. It's really a group of people and this one woman, we'll get to the stories individually, who were faced with very similar challenges and what happened at the challenge and the aftermath. So we have in the book of Numbers, chapter 13, we have the story of the Jews. We know the Jews, they left Egypt and they started heading towards Israel. They were at the doorstep of Israel, and Moses has the idea, or the people have the idea, it's not clear, but there's an idea that's presented to send in spies to check out Israel. So what the agreement was is that there's the 12 tribes of Israel. Each tribe has a leader, and they would send each one of those individual leaders, those 12 men, to go into Israel. It says they're going to Israel, they start from the south, they tour the whole land, and they try to, it's like scouting. You want to check out what the enemy has. What kind of fortifications, and how big is the population, and where do they live, and what kind of defenses do they have. And they do this wonderful exploration of the land. It takes them 40 days. They get back to Israel, and 10 of them decide to badmouth the land of Israel. And it says that they said, oh gosh, we cannot be successful. The people who live there, there's so many different kingdoms and tribes and nations, and they're so strong, and they're so big, and they're so mighty, and there's no way we can be successful. Let's go back to Egypt. This is terrible. Even God can't help us. And it's an utter disaster. And it's a turning point in the trajectory of the Torah and the story of the Jews leaving Egypt, that they left Egypt, they right away went to Israel. They're at the doorstep, literally the doorstep of Israel. They send in these 40 men. They come back. They start speaking really negatively about the land of Israel. And they started somewhat of a riot or revolt against Moses. And the Almighty says these people spent 40 days touring the land of Israel and speaking badly about Israel and doubting me, so to speak, like doubting my capabilities. That if you have the Almighty on your side, of course you could vanquish the enemy, for sure. No question about it. These people they lapsed in their faith, and because of the 40 days they spent touring the land with nefarious intentions, corresponding to that, the Jews will have to spend 40 years in the wilderness before they go into Israel. 40 days equals 40 years. And we know that it's a terrible thing. And this is a major problem that we have right in the middle of the Torah, where you have these 40 men who were the leaders of the nation. These 10 men. The leaders of the tribes, the Nesiim, these were tzaddikim, these were righteous people, these were scholars, these were men of the highest regard in moral issues, in societal issues, in matters of scholarship. These were the top of the line, the crème de la crème for our French speakers. The best of the best. And they came, and they were presented with a challenge. They encountered what they determined to be these almost unachievable or indefensible or this mighty enemy that there's no way the Jews will be successful. And they kind of forgot about God. And they convinced the nation that we can't do it. And the aftermath of that was that not only they didn't go into the land right away, they spent 40 years in the desert, but also every single person that was around then died. Right? God says, I got so upset about this. Anyone who left Egypt is not going to go into Israel. With the exception of the two righteous of the 12, there's 12 people that went. 10 of them, all of them began as righteous, God-fearing leaders, and 2 of them were fighting back. It was an encounter. You have these 10 men trying to announce, "Oh, we can't be successful. It's terrible." And you have 2 people. One of them was Joshua and Caleb, who were fighting against them. What do you mean? We have the mighty on our side. We could destroy them, no problem. That's one side of that's one story. And then if you look at the Haftorah of that parsha, we read the story about a woman whose name was Rachav, who was a prostitute, who was also faced with a kind of a similar situation. What happened? This is in the book of Joshua. Moses died. Right? 40 years passed. Moses is dead. Joshua takes over. Right? Joshua also sends in spies. 40 years, a lot changed. Geopolitical, military situation has changed. Send in 2 more people, and these 2 people find safe shelter in this home, in the home of this woman. This woman lived in Jericho. Jericho, we know, was the first city that the Jews encountered when they went into Israel. So she lived at the edge of the city, and she had a little pulley system. In the wall of the city, she had a little house there, and she had like a pulley system. People would climb up, and that was kind of her business model. And they ended up over there, and the authorities said, "Oh gosh, there's two spies, 2 scouts, 2 Israelis, but Jewish people coming to scout out." And he says, "Oh, well, we saw them around." And she says, "Oh, I didn't see them. I think they went that way." And she hid them, and they said, "Oh, thank you so much." And she said, "Yeah, I know. The Almighty took you out of Egypt, and the Almighty did so many wonderful miracles. And we know that the Jews are going to be successful when they conquer Israel. Please do me a favor. When you conquer Israel, spare me and my family." So I say, "Yeah, sure." They told her that when the war begins, you put a little red string by your window. No one's going to touch you. Sorry for scaring you. And then you fast forward to the chapter 6 of the book of Joshua. They went and attacked Jericho, and it says the city, it and all that is in it, shall be consecrated property for Hashem. So they captured and plundered everything. Only Rachav, they call it the innkeeper, we'll get to that, shall live, she and all who are with her in a house, because she hid the emissaries whom we sent. Okay? And if you examine the stories, both these stories very clearly, you notice that the difference between these 10 righteous men and this one woman was in the same area. These 10 men said, we can't be successful. Yeah, we have the Almighty on our side, but still we saw the enemy. We saw what they could do. We saw their military might. There's no way we could overcome them. These 10 men had a lapse of faith. As opposed to this woman, I'll read you what she says. "I know that Hashem has given you the land, and that fear of you has fallen upon us, and all the inhabitants of the land have dissolved because of you. For we have heard how Hashem dried up the waters of the sea of reeds for you, when he went forth from Egypt, when he did to the 2 kings of the Amorites who crossed the Jordan, of Sichon and Og, who were utterly destroyed. We heard and our hearts melted. No spirits remained in any man." She was like, "We know everything that happened to you." She was so impressed. She was so awed about what she heard. She said, I know the Almighty's going to come. You guys are going to destroy the place. Do me a favor, spare me. So we have on one hand 10 righteous men, 10 pious men, 10 leaders of the Jewish people who witnessed with their own eyes. They were there. They were privy to these experiences. They saw the splitting of the sea. They saw the Sinai experience. Revelation. They were there. They saw it with their own eyes. And they couldn't wrap their heads around the idea that God is really in control and has the ability to assert himself and to do whatever it is that needs to be done to conquer Israel. And this woman, she was a woman clearly of ill repute. We'll get to a little bit of the highlights of her career from the sources. But she was someone who was clearly moralistically challenged, shall we say. And she wasn't even there. She only heard what happened. And she had such a fear of heaven. She had such a tangible understanding about the power of God that she was able to say, I know that you guys are going to be successful. I'm going to spare you, even though the people might come after me. I might suffer as a result of that. And I want you to save me. So how is it possible? We're presented these 2 stories right next to each other. One of them is in the Torah, one of them is in the prophets, but still in the Haftorah of this Parsha Shlach, that talks about the Jewish spies, right, and what happened to 10 men. We see that same story. So the Torah is clearly trying to present this contrast. How is it possible? How is it possible that 10 pious men, right, top of the line, they failed so miserably in a place where the woman of ill repute was so successful and was able to to positively address this conflict, this challenge, and stand up for the faith. What do y'all say? So this woman is called Rachav Hazona.
That's a question.
Huh? Yes, shoot.
So those 10 men that were scouting out Israel.
Well, it was really 12, but only 10 of them went awry.
Right. God told them to go to Israel, right? He's like, leave Egypt, go to Israel. So they should be confident that He's going to help them conquer Israel.
Absolutely, they were there. They were privy. So there are those that say that Rachav Hazona, the word zona, could also mean someone who nourishes, like mazon, birkat hamazon, right? The word mazon could be nourishment as well. So those people try to sidestep or pivot around this woman's occupation by saying that she wasn't actually a prostitute. She was just like an innkeeper, or she was someone who's like, a cook or something like that. But I have some sources that I collected today that says, it talks about this woman was just stunning, gorgeous. Like, it gives a list in the Talmud that says that there's these 4 most beautiful women of all time. You think that's like a People magazine cover article?
Helen of Troy.
Huh?
Helen of Troy as well.
Helen of Troy. Okay, well, who's number 2? Sarah. We know that Sarah. Abigail. Rachav, our woman Rachav, and Esther, Queen Esther. And some say, Esther had a greenish hue to her. It was Vashti, the other woman of the original queen of the Achashverosh Purim story. So clearly the Torah is highlighting the way she looks, and a little bit later on about in that same Talmudic page, it says that this woman had such a power of seduction or of arousal that if people would say her name, they would just merely saying her name would cause people to whatever. And then one guy says, wait a minute, I said her name, and nothing happened to me. He says, well, you didn't know her. These people who knew her. And then there's another piece of Talmud elsewhere, at the other end of the Talmud, that says that this woman was an expert at her field. And it says that there wasn't, this is a quote from the Talmud in Zvachim 116b. There's no minister or nobleman who didn't sleep with this woman, Rachav. So she was a highly experienced, it seems like she was a prostitute. It's possible she was an innkeeper, but we see, but there's clearly an indication that this woman was, maybe yes, maybe no, we don't know. And not only was she successful, and then later on, fast forward, her family saved, the Jews, right, they take over Jericho, but then they move on to capture the rest of Israel. Obviously, it took many years. They didn't fully capture the whole country for 400 years. They didn't get Jerusalem until 400 years later. But what happened to this woman? So we have the epilogue with this woman, and the epilogue is that she actually converted, and according to one opinion of the Midrash, she actually married Joshua. Booyah! Now, who was Joshua? Joshua was the primary disciple of Moses, who was the leader of the Jews. So clearly she had a major shift in her practice, in her ideology, in her morals and everything. She was able to not only to go from such a low to such a tremendous high. Now remember, that's the Midrash. It's not so clear that everyone agrees with that. But there is this one opinion in the Midrash that she actually married Joshua.
Did Joshua see the Red Sea part and all that stuff?
Yeah, of course.
Well,
he was.
She can believe what he says.
She believed it, but the question is like, if you are like the leader of the Jewish people, what would it take for a woman who was the most? It says that she was a prostitute for 40 years. And then she does tshuva, she decides to repent and become a better person. Like, she still has a long way to go to reach the status, or at least the spiritual status, necessary to marry such a person, like for their morals to be aligned.
No, just Yom Kippur.
Huh?
Yom Kippur, you're done.
Yom Kippur, you're done. Well, maybe. Well, that's the interesting epilogue. So that's my question. My question is, how is it possible, or what's the rationale behind these two stories? Right? You see the 10 righteous men, the best of the best of the Jewish people. These are the best people that we can nominate. These were righteous people. These were men of tremendous leadership and responsibility. These were people that witnesses with their own eyes the 10 plagues in Egypt, splitting of the sea, vanquishing Pharaoh and the mighty Egyptians, Revelation at Sinai. These are people that had levels of prophecy. These were really great people. And in this one trip, in this one excursion of the land of Israel, before you know it, they're kind of rejecting God, or rejecting the power, dominion of God to assert himself. And on the other hand, you have this woman who's a prostitute for 40 years, who is somehow able to see through all of that and recognize that God has the power, and even though she only heard about that, and to really play out the whole story and say, I know you guys are going to win, just spare me. I know that God took care of you, he split the sea, I know that you guys gave you the Torah, I'm aware of all that. I believe, I'm on board. That's my question. What do you say, Matt? I know you're going to have something good for me.
Well, she converted Judaism.
She converted. That's the postscript.
After this.
Yeah.
I don't know. That helped my point. I think of another one now. I was just saying, like, if you converted Judaism, maybe it was so special to her that she believed all the stories and all that, so she was on board in that aspect. But I don't know.
What do you say, Abraham?
Yeah, can you just repeat what's the main point? Like how?
What's the main question? I'm trying to contrast. People were this person and this group of people were presented with a very similar conflict. On one hand, they see a mighty nation with heavy fortifications, wonderful weaponry. On the other hand, they see the Jewish people with not so many weapons, but with God. And both of them played out the scenario in their minds. And the 10 righteous people said, there's no way that God could beat up these people. No way. Let's go back to Egypt. We're toast. And this woman seemingly does not have the same spiritual highs or spiritual levels that these men. She says, yeah, of course we have the military, but so what? God like that, and they're done.
Maybe
that's the question.
Maybe it's she's changing her life, and she wants to believe in something and become a better person, and so she starts believing in God.
As opposed to those 10 people.
Well, as opposed to those 10 people, I don't know, but I'm just trying to think why she would do it and not them.
Abraham has something percolating. I see it.
Yeah, I'm trying to...
Percolating.
If they're obviously Chachamim, so...
Chachamim is scholars.
So if you go from there, maybe they were second testing the Am Israel, because, while the Jewish people were on the desert, they did the whole,
Egel?
Right, like the golden
calf?
Calf, exactly. So they got tested there and failed. So now they were almost at, the borderline right there, hitting it, and these Ha'amim were testing the Jewish people to see if we come back with this, let's see how they reacted there, if they're still, without faith. Because also, I think I studied this, a while ago, but I can't really remember. But wasn't the mistake that these Ha'amim, it wasn't that they pointed out that the other army was strong, because that was what Hashem had told them to do. They had a mission. They were told, go and see what's going on.
It was mentioning the invincibility.
Right, exactly.
You have God on your side. Nothing's invincible.
Right. So
let me read you a quote from what they said here. We cannot ascend to that people, for it is too strong for us. They're too strong. What do you mean too strong? You have the Almighty on your side.
So maybe what I'm saying is that maybe it was a test.
Yes, but it's a very interesting theory. We have to see if it works out with the narrative, because the narrative says that they caused this hysteria that resulted in the Jewish people saying, "Oh, if only we died in Egypt." The entire assembly said to them, "If only we had died in the land of Egypt, or if only we had died in the wilderness. Why is Hashem bringing us to this land to die by the sword? Our wives and our children were taken captive. Isn't it better to go back to Egypt?"
So they failed.
Oh, so you say maybe the Jews failed.
Right.
Interesting. That's an interesting theory.
Because, if your leader, says, well, we're not going to win, but there's a higher level leader, which is,
That's an interesting
God.
theory, but the mainstream approach, and for sure the ones brought by the Midrash and Rashi and the Talmud, they seem to say that these people really screwed up. So much so that we have indications that these people, they gave up faith. They started idolatry.
Did they see any?
Really, I can show it to you. It's source. These people just went totally off the cliff,
Right.
off the deep end.
But it's difficult to understand if they're Hahamim.
It's very hard. That's why my question.
Their level would have been so much higher than
Absolutely.
nowadays.
When they were in the desert, was God present? Did they see God?
Yeah.
Since the Red
It
Sea
says
parting?
that whenever
He stuck up in there for 40 years. Maybe
no,
they
this is
kinda-
before the 40 years. This is before the 40
And
years.
anyway, even during the 40s, they had manna, they had
Food coming down from the sky. Can you imagine raining?
they had the cloud right in front of them.
It's kind of like coming to talk. There's just food everywhere. Just there. So I wanted to present maybe a few theories just to throw out here. One of them was actually presented by our very own Jared Dubin. I threw out this idea. At the question, he gave his own idea, which is a comment. He's like, yeah. Should we call him up and say, "Hey, Jared, where are you?
You recorded
We're talking about you." I am, yeah.
Maybe that was yours. I got one chance I did, but you weren't here. So I'm going to take credit for it.
Hey, everyone can text him. By the way, where were you? So he pointed out a very interesting comment, and he said that this shows us, it demonstrates that no matter where someone is in the totem pole of spiritual status, someone could be the highest, you could fall, you have a test, you could be successful or failure, and even on the bottom, it's never lost, and you're never sure of your success. You could be on top of the world, and you cannot be sure that you're not going to make a mistake.
Doing her his name.
That would be awesome.
That would be really
Ta-da!
not quite.
Who's this? Tell him to come back in, what's it called?
The freezing morning.
Tell him to come sit down. I don't know. Who's it? I have no idea who it is. Michelle? Someone come here. What does he say? He wants money? Some people come from Israel to collect money from our community. He's from Israel?
Probably, I don't know.
Whatever. Okay. So that was a very interesting theory that and we see that I could source this. He didn't even know what he said. It was such a brilliant idea that you could never be sure. Like the Mishnah says, you don't believe in yourself to the day you die. You cannot be sure that you won't fail. You cannot be sure. You have to always be vigilant. You cannot have what's it called when someone is complacency. You can't be complacent. You can't say, "Oh, I'm good. All right, I accomplished enough." Right? Because the second you have, and you might have, right? But the second you do that, you're liable to fall. Constantly pedal to the metal, put it to the floor. You have to always have that energy and always try to be growing and improving. Because if you're not growing and improving,
You're going backward.
you're regressing. Because life is like
I don't know.
life is like a. Thank you. If you're not progressing, you're falling off, and you could just. And once you're falling off, who knows what could happen to you?
It's funny because Facebook is kind of the same way. They don't celebrate any victory; they just keep moving because the second they think that they're on top.
Well, any successful company. This is another. Even companies the second you stop and just have a breather, you're Nintendo or Sony or any one of these companies. That's not right. Only the paranoid.
Survive.
Very good. Survive. Only that you have to constantly be innovating. But it's like that also in ourselves, in our character. That And for sure in our Judaism, that if we're not constantly growing, then by definition we're regressing. And wherever you're holding, you could be in the top of the world. You could be the 10 biggest scholars Jewish people have. You're not growing. You're heading the wrong direction. You're regressing. And even at your lofty level, you could fail a test. As opposed to someone who's all the way at the bottom, like literally the moral, the bottom of the moral barrel. And they decide to make a change. They're heading in the right direction. Well, they could succeed in the same year that those great people failed. So I actually mixed up two ideas. The first idea is that you can never be sure either way. People have choices, and the choices that they have enable them, even wherever they're holding, to be successful or to fail. The other idea, which I kind of mixed them together, and I apologize for that, is that I wrote it down here. It's not where you are; it's where you're heading. It's much more important the direction, because we say haba letaher misa'ayin oto, haba letameh potchim lo, which means if someone comes to purify, if someone wants to improve, then he's granted a certain spiritual energy that can just take him and just shoot him to the moon. But if someone has a desire, makes a step in the direction of becoming impure, of regressing, then the doors are wide open for him. So these 10 people, they started their journey with a little bit of a perspective of let's see, maybe these people are just unvanquishable. Maybe. They had some element of a decision of starting off with the wrong foot and opening up themselves for the possibility that maybe we can conquer them. Let's go check it out. Let's find out. Let's see what the enemy's really all about. So they had this little bit of doubt, right? Maybe God cannot do it. Let's find out. And before you know it, right, all the terrible decisions are just wide open, and you could very, very easily fall into that trap and just never get out. And the consequences were just disastrous. 40 years and Moses never got to Israel. Think about it. Moses gave up his heart and soul to the Jewish people. His whole life, when he was the leader, he wasn't able to see it. He wasn't able to see it. And all the people that were there, that were part of leaving Egypt, they all died. It was their kids. Their kids were the ones that were able to experience it. They weren't able to enjoy what they toiled so hard. 40 years in the desert, they're all dead. Once they're all dead, they go into Israel. Whoever's left. But I think the lesson for us is that when someone wants to change, either way, if someone's all the way at the bottom, right, but they decide that they want to make an improvement and they have a genuine decision, commitment to try to have a certain measure of growth, they're granted a certain just spiritual power that gives them the ability to overcome whatever obstacle they'll encounter. As opposed to someone's on the top of the line, but opens up their heart to the possibility that maybe God can't do it. Right? Accepts just the possibility. Let's find out. Right? So they have a little bit of doubt as to whether or not God can do something. Right? So that on their level, that's a sin. Right? And they open up themselves to the possibilities. Well, then the world is there for them to the obstacles are just there primed for them to trip over.
Seems like it's a lot easier to fall than to rise.
Ooh, absolutely. You can fall a lot faster than you can climb, right?
You have to have all this energy to rise, apparently, and not everybody can have tons of energy 24/7, 365. It's a slow and steady. It's like it's always compared to. Remember, we had the story of Jacob. Jacob's sleeping. There's a ladder, so that ladder is always metaphoric for spiritual growth. You want to climb up the ladder, it's got to be one rung at a time. It's got to be like that. As opposed to if you want to fall off the ladder, all you got to do is let go, and before you know it, you're just plunging down at an incredible speed. And that's just the reality. But there is exceptions that you bring that up. There are exceptions for that. We look at the day Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is special because Yom Kippur, those rules, slow and steady, those rules are just scrapped. You throw them out. Yom Kippur is one day where there's no limitations. Right? You could just take the elevator, so to speak, or escalator up that ladder. The entire year you have to you do one step. You make sure you're steady in that step. You get comfortable there. You can move up to the next step. Yom Kippur, shoot for the stars. It's all open there for you. Right? There's just opportunity. That's one example. There's other times like that during the year. But the point is that the second someone makes this little decision, but it's a real sincere, genuine decision that they want to improve, they want to grow, they want to connect to the roots, they want to connect to the Judaism, they want to reinvent their relationship with God. That one decision gives them tremendous power to be successful in any challenges they'll face over the course of that journey. And we see this woman, she was a prostitute for 40 years. Just think about that. 40 years a prostitute, and before you know it, she was married to Joshua. So that's an incredible journey. But it all started with this one decision. And she was able to overcome one challenge, another challenge, and before you know it, she was able to
You said she had family though, so she must have married.
Well, her family, but her family's like her brothers and sisters and cousins and uncles.
Oh,
that kind of family. No, it's actually one of those industries where it's kind of better to be single. The industry that she was in.
You said she was an innkeeper, so.
Yeah, maybe it's possible. Either way, so my inspiration from this is that yes, while growth is really slow and it takes a long time, but the most important thing is that first step. And because that first step dictates what's going to be. So if that first step is a negative step, well, you can be at the top of the line. Before you know it, you're slowly at the bottom. If that first step is the positive step, if that one decision, that one genuine, in your heart of hearts, something you come to realize as being worthy of considering, either way, if it's genuine, you're granted a tremendous amount of spiritual power, and nothing will stop you. Well, you'll still need to work, but the hard part's behind you. So that's those my ideas. I think that there's legitimacy to what Jared was saying, and I'm sure that if we all think about this over the next week, we can all come up with something else. And please, everyone, get back to us as to Friday night. We'd love to see you all of you Friday night. It's not going to be here. It's on the same block, but it's going to be by Johnny's house. We really love. Bruce, you're in Miami? Mm-hmm. Darn.
I'll get an email.
Okay, I'll get an email. And that's that. Hopefully we could just make the right decisions and constantly be growing on our own personal spiritual ladder.
Go ahead.
Yes, Dana.
Question. You said 40 years. We were thinking about it. Let's say she's 10. That would mean that she's 50.
Actually.
So how is that possible?
How is it possible that she was active for that long?
For 40 years, because that would mean that she's at least 50 years old. People didn't live that long back then.
Well, that's like a million years old.
Okay, wait a minute. Just because you. Okay, I am going to read this one. I'm going to read this because literally you hit the nail on the head. Okay. Okay. Who here speaks somewhat of some modicum of Hebrew? And okay, I'm going to read it in Hebrew what the Talmud says, and you translate it. Amru. Bat Yud Shanim Haita Kishyatsu Yisrael Mitzrayim.
She was 10 years old when the Jews came out of Egypt.
V'zansa kol mem shana shahayu shel b'midbar.
Do I have to translate that?
Yes.
Crap. Use your good judgment.
She had relations.
Well, she was engaged in
relations
And Achar Nun Shana Nisgaira.
And after 50 years, she converted, or she changed.
What she converted.
She converted.
And she was 50 years old when she converted. So you actually hit the nail on the head of the timeline. How do you like that?
I just knew it.
So yes.
You
So
thought she was an innkeeper. You gotta make a choice.
anyhow, so that's it's interesting that the people that the codifier or the people that decided to have this Haftorah to be partnered with this parsha were clearly trying to show us the two times where there was spies and the two very, very different results. So I just thinking that's something which is worthy of examining and seeing if we find some lesson. And I hope we did. And thank you all. I love you guys. We'll see everyone next week by Johnny's house and send out the relative.